Tonight, we journey back to an age when the world was still young, when dragons darkened the skies, when Balrogs walked openly across Middle-earth, and when Sauron himself feared those who opposed him. Throughout the long history of Tolkien's legendarium, countless kings, warriors, and heroes rose and fell. Yet only a handful of elves became legends whose names endured through every age. One fought a Balrog and returned from death itself. One watched over Middle-earth for thousands of years, witnessing kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall, and the final departure of the elves. One stood before the Dark Lord himself, leading the last alliance. In a battle that would change the fate of the world forever. Tonight, we follow the lives of three of the greatest elves ever to walk Middle-earth: Glorfindel, Círdan the Shipwright, Gil-galad. If you enjoy these relaxing journeys through Tolkien's history and lore, consider subscribing and let me know where you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let us journey to the first age when the greatest of the Eldar still walked beneath the stars. A time when one of the greatest cities ever built still stood hidden from the world. The story begins in Gondolin, the hidden city. Few places in all of Tolkien's legendarium inspire such wonder. Hidden among encircling mountains and protected by secret ways known to only a handful of people, Gondolin existed almost like a dream made real. Its white towers rose beneath clear skies. Its fountains sparkled in the sunlight. Its streets echoed with music and laughter. While much of Beleriand suffered beneath the shadow of Morgoth, Gondolin endured, safe, beautiful, untouched. The traveler can imagine seeing the city from afar, the mountains opening suddenly, the hidden valley revealed, golden roofs gleaming beneath the sun, countless banners fluttering in the wind. The city seemed less like a fortress and more like a vision, a memory of paradise preserved in Middle-earth. Among its many noble houses stood one especially admired, the House of the Golden Flower. Its warriors carried golden emblems upon their armor. Its banners shimmered like sunlight upon fields of summer wheat. Its people were known not only for courage, but also for beauty and grace, and among them rose a young lord named Glorfindel. Even in a city filled with remarkable individuals, Glorfindel stood apart, not because he sought attention, not because he demanded authority, but because some individuals possess a natural nobility that others immediately recognize. The histories tell us surprisingly little about his early years, yet what they reveal is enough. He became lord of one of Gondolin's most respected houses, a position requiring wisdom, leadership, and trust. The traveler imagines him walking the streets of the hidden city during those peaceful years, golden banners overhead, children playing beside fountains, the distant mountains standing watch around the valley, the scent of flowers drifting through warm summer air. These were good years, years of peace, years when the future still seemed bright. Few people within Gondolin fully understood how fragile that peace truly was. Far to the north, Morgoth still watched, still searched, still waited. And even as Glorfindel's reputation grew, forces were already moving that would eventually bring fire and ruin to the most beautiful city ever built by the elves. But for now, Gondolin remained untouched. The bells rang from its towers, the fountains sang within its plazas, and beneath banners of gold, the young lord of the House of the Golden Flower enjoyed the final peaceful years before history changed forever. The years passed gently in Gondolin. Within the hidden valley, life followed rhythms that seemed untouched by the troubles of the outside world. Seasons came and went. Snow gathered upon the encircling peaks before melting into streams that fed the city's fountains and gardens. Flowers bloomed along stone pathways. Music drifted from open courtyards during warm evenings. The traveler can almost believe the city would last forever. Many of its people believed something similar, not because they were foolish, because Gondolin appeared invincible. Its location remained secret. Its defenses were formidable. Its warriors ranked among the finest in all of Beleriand. And among those warriors, few were more admired than the Lord of the House of the Golden Flower. Glorfindel's name became increasingly respected throughout the city, not through dramatic acts, not through boasts or displays of pride, rather through steady excellence, the sort that gradually earns trust, the sort that causes others to follow naturally. The histories rarely describe him in detail, yet what little they do reveal is striking. Again and again, Glorfindel appears as someone others relied upon, someone respected by warriors and nobles alike, someone whose courage never required advertisement. The traveler imagines him standing upon the high walls of Gondolin at sunrise, the mountains glowing gold beneath the first light of morning, the city awakening below, the sounds of daily life beginning to stir. In moments like these, it must have seemed impossible that Gondolin could ever fall. The city had endured for generations. Many believed it would endure for generations more. Yet, hidden cities carry a peculiar danger. Their safety can create confidence. Confidence can become certainty, and certainty often blinds people to approaching threats. Glorfindel appears to have avoided that mistake. While others enjoyed the peace of Gondolin, he remained a warrior, not because war consumed his thoughts, because vigilance remained necessary. Beyond the mountains, Morgoth still ruled from Angband. The dark enemy had not been defeated, only contained. For centuries, that distinction mattered little to the people of Gondolin. To warriors like Glorfindel, it mattered greatly. The House of the Golden Flower trained constantly. Its warriors maintained discipline. Their armor remained polished. Their weapons remained ready, not from fear, from duty. The traveler can imagine the training grounds beneath clear skies, golden banners fluttering overhead, the sound of swords striking shields, the rhythm of disciplined practice. The city may have been hidden, but its defenders never forgot their purpose, and among them, Glorfindel stood as an example. Not merely a commander, a leader. The difference is important. Commanders give orders. Leaders inspire confidence. The stories that survive suggest Glorfindel possessed the latter gift naturally. People trusted him, not because of rank, because of character. The traveler notices something unusual about many of Tolkien's greatest heroes. They rarely seek greatness, it finds them. Glorfindel belongs firmly within that tradition. Nothing suggests personal ambition. Nothing suggests a desire for power. He appears content serving his city and his people. Content protecting something beautiful. There is a quiet nobility in that, especially when compared to other figures whose stories revolve around crowns and kingdoms. Glorfindel's story begins with service. and it remains defined by service until the very end. The years continue passing. The city prospers. Its white towers shine beneath sunlight. Its marketplaces thrive. Its gardens flourish. From the outside, Gondolin seems blessed, a final refuge of beauty amid a wounded world. The traveler can almost hear the fountains splashing within its plazas, can almost see children running through sunlit streets, can almost feel the confidence of a people who believe they have escaped history's dangers. Yet history has a way of finding even the most hidden places. Far beyond the mountains, events continue unfolding. Battles are fought, kingdoms weaken, secrets spread, and eventually, one secret proves fatal. Because no fortress remains hidden forever, no city remains beyond the reach of fate. The traveler knows what awaits. The title of the next chapter leaves little mystery. The Fall of Gondolin. Perhaps the most tragic event of the First Age. A catastrophe so immense that songs would remember it thousands of years later. The city still stands for now. Its towers still gleam beneath the sun. Its people still walk peaceful streets. Glorfindel still leads the House of the Golden Flower. Yet unseen forces are already moving. Betrayal has already taken root. And somewhere beyond the northern mountains, Morgoth has finally learned what he sought for centuries: the location of the hidden city. The doom of Gondolin is approaching, and when it comes, Glorfindel will earn a place in legend that is endured across every age that follows. Let us leave the peaceful years behind. The fountains still sing. The banners still flutter above white towers. The sunlight still shines upon Gondolin. But the final day has arrived, and no one yet knows it. For centuries, the hidden city had stood untouched, protected by mountains, protected by secrecy, protected by the belief that some places might escape the darkness consuming the world. But Morgoth was patient. Far more patient than most people realize. He could wait years, decades, even centuries, and eventually, patience brought him what force never could: knowledge. The location of Gondolin. The secret had been revealed through betrayal, one of the oldest tragedies in Tolkien's legendarium. Not a fortress defeated by strength, a fortress defeated by information. The traveler imagines the first signs appearing at dawn, watchers upon the walls noticing movement in distant valleys, strange shadows where none should be, the uneasy feeling that something is wrong, very wrong. Then comes certainty. The mountains surrounding Gondolin begin filling with enemies, not a raiding force, not a small army, an invasion. One of the greatest assaults of the First Age. The city awakens to war. Bells ring from towers. Messengers race through streets. Warriors gather beneath their banners. The peaceful rhythms of daily life vanish instantly. In their place comes urgency, fear, determination. The traveler can almost hear the sound, the ringing alarms, a clash of armor, the thunder of distant drums echoing among the mountains, and above all, the realization spreading through the city: Gondolin has been found. For many citizens, the truth seems impossible. The city has always been hidden, always protected, always safe. Yet the evidence stands before them. The enemy surrounds the valley. The final battle has begun. Glorfindel gathers the warriors of the House of the Golden Flower. Their banners rise above the streets. Golden sunlight catches polished armor. The sight is magnificent, yet heartbreaking, because the traveler knows many of these warriors will never see another sunrise. Still, there is no panic. Not among the defenders, only resolve. The people of Gondolin understand what is at stake. Their homes, their families, their city. Everything they love stands behind them, and so they fight. The battle that follows becomes one of the most legendary conflicts in Tolkien's history, not merely because of its scale, because of its tragedy. The traveler imagines the streets of Gondolin transformed into battlefields, fire spreading across rooftops, smoke rising into the sky, the white city glowing red beneath the flames. Everywhere, defenders struggle desperately to hold back the tide. The enemy seems endless. Orcs flood through breaches. Monstrous creatures march beneath Morgoth's banners. The city shakes beneath the violence. And yet, Gondolin does not surrender. Not immediately, not easily. Its defenders fight with astonishing courage, house by house, street by street, tower by tower. Among them stands Glorfindel, the Lord of the Golden Flower. The traveler can picture him moving through the chaos, his armor gleaming amid smoke and fire, his banner still visible, his warriors rallying around him. The histories speak of his courage during these terrible hours, not because he sought glory, because others needed leadership. The city begins falling apart around him. Buildings collapse, flames spread. Entire districts disappear beneath smoke, yet the defenders continue fighting. The traveler notices something important here. Many stories focus on the destruction. The fire, the violence, the ruin. But Tolkien's version of the fall of Gondolin is ultimately about something else. Sacrifice. Again and again, individuals place themselves between danger and those they protect. Again and again, heroes choose duty over survival. Glorfindel belongs firmly among them. As the battle worsens, a grim reality becomes unavoidable. The city cannot be saved. The walls are breached. The defenses are failing. The enemy continues advancing. The leaders of Gondolin face a terrible choice: remain and die, or evacuate as many people as possible. The decision is made. A group of survivors must escape. Women, children, refugees. The last remnants of the hidden city. The traveler imagines them gathering amid smoke and confusion, leaving behind homes they will never see again, leaving behind a city that defined their entire lives. The sorrow is immense. Yet, there is no alternative. Gondolin is doomed. Only its people can still be saved. And so, the refugees begin their journey, out through secret paths, into the mountains, away from the burning city. Behind them, Gondolin dies. Its towers collapse. Its streets vanish beneath fire. Its glory becomes memory. Ahead lies uncertainty, danger, a desperate escape through hostile terrain. Glorfindel travels with the refugees, not because he must, because that is where he is needed. The strongest warriors place themselves between the survivors and the pursuing enemy, a living shield, a final line of protection. The mountains rise around them, cold, steep, unforgiving. The escape route narrows. The traveler feels the tension growing because the story is approaching its most famous moment, the moment that transformed Glorfindel from a respected lord into a legend. Far behind them, Gondolin burns. Far ahead lies survival. And somewhere along the mountain path, an ancient terror waits, a creature of shadow and flame, a Balrog of Morgoth. The same kind of being that Gandalf will one day face beneath the depths of Moria. Only this battle comes thousands of years earlier, upon a lonely mountain pass at the very edge of hope. And before the refugees can reach safety, someone must stand against it. The refugees continue climbing. Behind them, Gondolin burns. The glow of the city illuminates the distant sky, turning the clouds red like a permanent sunset. Ahead lies only darkness, mountains, narrow paths, uncertainty. Some say the traveler can imagine the exhaustion settling over the survivors. Many have lost everything: homes, friends, entire lives left behind among the ruins of the hidden city. Yet they continue moving, because stopping means death. The mountain path twists higher and higher. Cold winds sweep through the passes. Loose stones shift beneath weary feet. The journey is difficult even without pursuit, and pursuit is exactly what follows them. The armies of Morgoth are not content with destroying Gondolin. They intend to destroy its people as well. The last survivors of the hidden city must not escape. The traveler feels the tension growing with every step. The path narrows. The cliffs steepen. The mountains close around the refugees. And then comes the moment. The moment that Tolkien fans have remembered for generations. The ambush. High among the rocks, enemies descend upon the fleeing survivors. Orcs, monsters. Creatures serving the will of Morgoth. The attack is sudden, violent, desperate. The narrow pass erupts into chaos. The strongest warriors immediately place themselves between the attackers and the refugees. Glorfindel stands among them. The Lord of the House of the Golden Flower. A survivor of Gondolin, a warrior already proven in battle. Yet, what approaches now is unlike anything else upon the mountain. The traveler imagines the first glimpse, a shape moving among fire and shadow, larger than the surrounding warriors, terrible, ancient, a being from the earliest darkness of the world. A Balrog. Even among Morgoth's servants, the Balrogs inspired fear. They were not mere monsters, they were corrupted spirits. Creatures of immense power, wrapped in flame and terror. Throughout the history of Middle-earth, very few individuals ever faced one. Fewer survived. The traveler immediately understands the danger. If the Balrog reaches the refugees, the escape ends here. The survivors of Gondolin perish. The last hope of the hidden city dies upon the mountain. Someone must stop it. Someone must hold the pass. and Glorfindel steps forward. There is no long speech, no dramatic declaration, only action, only duty. The traveler notices how perfectly this fits his character. Glorfindel never seeks glory. He simply goes where he is needed. And at this moment, he is needed more than ever. The battle narrows. The refugees continue moving towards safety, while the warriors fight desperately behind them. The mountain pass becomes a place of fire and steel, a place where history balances upon a knife's edge. The Balrog advances. Flames illuminate the rocks, shadows leap across the cliffs. The ancient terror seems almost unstoppable. Yet Glorfindel stands his ground. The traveler imagines the scene as Tolkien describes it. Wind roaring through the heights, fire reflecting from armor, the abyss waiting below. Two figures meeting at the narrowest point of the path. One, a lord of the Eldar, the other, a demon of Morgoth. Light against darkness, hope against despair. The duel becomes legendary, not because it is long, because of what it represents. The Balrog embodies the destruction that has consumed Beleriand for centuries. Glorfindel embodies everything Gondolin once stood for: courage, beauty, sacrifice. The battle rages upon the edge of the precipice. Steel clashes against ancient power. The mountain itself seems to tremble. The traveler feels the scale of the moment. Entire futures depend upon the outcome. Not merely lives, histories. If the refugee survives, the bloodline of Gondolin survives. If they perish, countless future events disappear from history. The struggle reaches its climax. The Balrog is finally overcome. The creature falls, defeated. Yet victory comes at a terrible price. For as the Balrog falls into the abyss below, it drags Glorfindel with it. The traveler pauses here, because this is one of the most powerful moments in Tolkien's entire legendarium. Glorfindel wins. The refugees are saved, the pass is held, the survivors escape. Everything he set out to accomplish succeeds, and yet he does not live to see it. The Lord of the House of the Golden Flower disappears into the depths beside his enemy. The mountains fall silent. The battle ends. The survivors continue their journey. Behind them lies Gondolin. Ahead lies an uncertain future. And Glorfindel is gone. The traveler imagines the grief that follows. Not merely because a warrior has fallen, because a symbol has fallen. One of Gondolin's greatest heroes, one of its noblest leaders, lost at the very moment of victory. For most stories, this would be the end. A heroic death, a legend, a name remembered in songs. And for thousands of years, many readers believed exactly that. But Glorfindel Story is unlike almost any other in Tolkien's world, because death is not the end of his journey, not even close. Far beyond the circles of Middle-earth, far beyond the mountains and seas, a far stranger chapter is about to begin. For while the refugees continue their road through the mortal world, Glorfindel's path lead somewhere few heroes have ever gone. To Valinor itself, and eventually back again. Let us leave the mountains behind. The duel is over. The Balrog has fallen. The refugees continue their long journey into an uncertain future. And far above the broken lands of Beleriand, the stars shine quietly over a world that has just lost one of its greatest heroes. Or so it seems. For most stories, this would be the end. The hero sacrifices himself. His people survive. His name enters legend. The final page closes. But Tolkien's world is stranger than that, and Glorfindel's story is far from finished. The traveler must remember something important about elves. Unlike men, their fate after death is different. Their spirits do not leave the world entirely. Instead, they are summoned westward, beyond the sea, beyond Middle-earth, to the halls of Mondos in Valinor, a place of waiting, reflection, healing. It is one of the most mysterious ideas in Tolkien's mythology, because very few characters ever travel that road and return. Glorfindel is one of the rare exceptions. The traveler imagines the silence after the fall, the noise of battle fading, the mountains disappearing, the burdens of the physical world falling away. No fire, no darkness, no fear, only stillness. A stillness deeper than any silence found in Middle-earth. The journey west begins, not across roads, not across oceans. A different kind of journey, one beyond the reach of mortal understanding. Tolkien never describes every detail, and perhaps that is for the best. Some mysteries gain power from remaining mysterious. Yet we know enough to glimpse the shape of what happened. Glorfindel's spirit reaches the Blessed Realm, the Undying Lands, the homeland from which many of the Eldar had once departed. The traveler imagines light, not blinding light, warm light, gentle light, the sort of light that seems woven into the world itself. The wounds of battle fade. The exhaustion of centuries fades. The grief of Gondolin fades. For the first time in a very long time, there is peace. The hidden city is gone. The wars of Beleriand continue far away. Yet here, beyond the sea, none of that remains. Only healing, only time. The traveler notices something remarkable. Tolkien does not describe Glorfindel as being punished, nor does he describe him as merely resting. Instead, the impression we receive is one of restoration, growth, preparation. The hero who died on the mountain pass is not simply preserved. He becomes something greater. The years pass differently in Valinor. Perhaps centuries, perhaps longer. Time matters less there. The Blessed Realm exists beyond many of the concerns shaping ordinary history. Meanwhile, Middle-earth continues changing. Beleriand sinks beneath the sea. The First Age ends, the Second Age rises. Kingdoms appear, kingdoms disappear. Entire civilizations emerge and vanish. Still, Glorfindel remains in the west, waiting, learning. The traveler imagines him walking beneath the trees of Valinor, a place he may have known long before Gondolin ever existed. Long before the mountain pass, long before the wars against Morgoth. The circles of his life seem almost complete, yet something remains unfinished. Because Middle-earth still needs heroes. The darkness has not vanished. The defeat of Morgoth does not end evil forever. Other shadows remain. Other dangers wait beyond the horizon. And among the powers of the West, a decision slowly begins to form. A rare decision. An extraordinary decision. Glorfindel will not remain in Valinor forever. The traveler pauses here, because this is where his story becomes truly unique. Many heroes die. Many heroes are remembered. Almost none are sent back. Glorfindel's sacrifice upon the mountain pass has earned something remarkable. Trust, honor, purpose. The powers of the West recognize what he represents. Courage without pride, strength without ambition, sacrifice without reward. Exactly the qualities Middle-earth will need in the ages ahead. The traveler can almost sense the future waiting. The rise of Sauron, the forging of rings, the fall of kingdoms, the long struggle against darkness. History continues moving. And somewhere beyond the sea, Glorfindel prepares for a second life, a second mission, a second chance to serve. Not because he seeks it, because it is asked of him. The stars continue shining above Middle-earth. The centuries continue passing. And while most of the world-fanned forgets the lord of the House of the Golden Flower, his story quietly approaches an impossible chapter. For soon, a hero long believed dead will walk the roads of Middle-earth once more. Not as a memory, not as a legend, but as Glorfindel himself, returned from the Blessed Realm, returned from death, returned for a purpose that will shape the fate of ages yet to come. Let us remain for a little while in the West, far beyond the shores of Middle-earth, far beyond the reach of mortal kingdoms. The centuries have passed quietly. The wounds of Gondolin have healed. The shadow of the mountain pass has faded into memory, and Glorfindel, once lord of the House of the Golden Flower, stands again beneath the light of Valinor. Yet, he is not the same elf who fell fighting the Balrog. How could he be? Few beings in Tolkien's world experience what Glorfindel experienced. He has seen the glory of Gondolin, the destruction of Gondolin, death itself, and beyond death, renewal. The traveler imagines him walking beneath the undying trees of the Blessed Realm. The years no longer feel heavy. The sorrows of the First Age no longer dominate every thought. The hero who once fought desperately upon a narrow mountain pass has gained something rare: perspective. A wider view of the world, a deeper understanding of sacrifice. a greater appreciation for humility. These qualities matter because eventually the powers of the West decide that Glorfindel's work is not finished. Middle-earth still needs guardians, still needs wisdom, still needs those willing to stand against darkness. The traveler should understand how unusual this is. Elves who died and reached Valinor generally remained there. Their stories ended. Their journeys were complete. Glorfindel's story begins again. Tolkien's later writings strongly suggest that he was sent back during the Second Age, or perhaps the early Third Age, as an emissary of the West. Not unlike the wizards who would later arrive, though different, very different. The wizards came cloaked in limitation, their power restrained, their memories clouded. Glorfindel returned as Glorfindel, a hero already proven, a servant already tested, a warrior whose loyalty required no further examination. The traveler can imagine the moment of departure, the sea stretching endlessly toward the horizon, the blessed realm fading behind him, the shores of Middle-earth waiting beyond the distance. It must have been a strange journey, not a voyage toward the unknown, a voyage back to a world he had once left forever. Many things had changed. Entire lands had disappeared beneath the sea. The First Age belonged to history. Most people living in Middle-earth had never heard the songs of Gondolin, never seen Beleriand, never known the world Glorfindel remembered. And yet he returned willingly, not to reclaim the past, to serve the future. The traveler notices how perfectly this reflects his character. Again and again, Glorfindel chooses duty over personal desire. At Gondolin, at the mountain pass, and now once more. He does not return seeking honor. He returns because help is needed. The centuries ahead prove difficult. Sauron's influence spreads. Kingdoms rise and fall. Wars reshape entire regions. Yet, wherever Glorfindel appears, the pattern remains the same. Service, protection, guidance. He becomes one of the great hidden defenders of Middle-earth. Not a king, not a conqueror. A guardian. The traveler imagines the reactions of those who encounter him. There must have been something unusual about Glorfindel. Something difficult to explain. Tolkien hints at this more than once. By the Third Age, Glorfindel possesses a spiritual presence unlike most other elves. A light, a power, a sense of authority, rooted not in rank, but in what he has experienced. He has seen things few living beings have seen. He has walked roads few have traveled, and those experiences remain visible in him, not physically. Spiritually, the traveler recalls something Gandalf later says about the great powers of the world. True authority rarely needs to announce itself. People feel it. They recognize it instinctively. Glorfindel seems to possess exactly that quality. The years continued passing. the second age gives way to the third. The great kingdoms of men emerge. Some flourish, some collapse. Throughout it all, Glorfindel remains, watching, helping, protecting, not seeking glory, not seeking power, merely continuing the mission that began thousands of years earlier, the mission of resisting darkness wherever it appears. Perhaps that is what makes his story so compelling. Unlike many legendary heroes, Glorfindel never becomes obsessed with his own importance. His greatest achievement, the defeat of a Balrog, does not define him. His return from death does not define him. Even his extraordinary status among the Eldar does not define him. What defines him is consistency. The same courage, the same humility, the same willingness to place himself between danger and those who need protection. The traveler realizes something. When Glorfindel returned from Valinor, he did not simply resume his old life. He became something rare. A living bridge between ages. A witness connecting the first age to the third. One of the last surviving links to the world before the world changed. And as the centuries continue unfolding, that rule becomes increasingly important. For a dark power is rising once more. The kingdoms of the north face growing threats. A terrible enemy is gathering strength, and soon Glorfindel will step onto the stage of history again. Not in Gondolin, not in Beleriand, but in the lands surrounding Rivendell, beside Elrond, beside the heirs of forgotten kingdoms, where prophecy awaits, a prophecy concerning the Lord of the Nazgul himself. And once again, Glorfindel's presence will alter the course of history. Let us leave the distant memories of Gondolin behind. The First Age has long since passed into legend. The mountains where Glorfindel fought the Balrog are now remembered only in songs and ancient tales. The world has changed. Entire continents have been reshaped. Kingdoms have risen and fallen. And yet, Glorfindel remains a living reminder of older days, a witness to ages that most people know only through stories. The traveler now finds him in a very different part of Middle-earth, the north, a land of forests, hills, ruined watchtowers, and forgotten roads, a land where history lingers quietly beneath the grass. And at its heart stands Rivendell, the last homely house, the refuge founded by Elrond Half-Elven. Few places in Middle-earth feel more peaceful. Sheltered among valleys and rivers, Rivendell seems untouched by the troubles of the wider world. Yet, appearances can be deceptive. Because throughout much of the Third Age, the North remains one of the most dangerous regions in Middle-earth. The kingdom of Arnor has fallen. Its cities lie abandoned. Its watchtowers crumble. Its royal line grows thin. And beyond the wild lands lurks an enemy more patient than most realize. The Witch King of Angmar. the greatest servant of Sauron, the Lord of the Nazgul. For centuries, he wages war against the northern kingdoms, not always through open battle. Sometimes through fear, sometimes through manipulation, sometimes through slow destruction. Kingdoms weaken, borders collapse, the wilderness spreads. The traveler imagines the old roads of Arnor during these years. Broken stones emerging from fields, ruined bridges crossing quiet rivers, watchtowers standing empty beneath the sky. Everywhere lie reminders of a kingdom that once stood strong. And throughout these troubled centuries, Glorfindel becomes one of its unseen defenders. Not a ruler, not a king, a guardian. The role suits him perfectly. The traveler notices how often Tolkien's greatest heroes occupy positions of service rather than authority. Elrond guides rather than commands. Gandalf advises rather than rules. And Glorfindel follows the same pattern. His strength exists to protect others, not to elevate himself. The years pass. The Witch King grows stronger. The northern kingdoms grow weaker. Many people lose hope, yet Rivendell endures, partly because of Elrond, partly because of hidden guardians like Glorfindel. The traveler imagines him riding through the northern wilds during these years, ancient forests stretching beneath the stars, the wind moving through forgotten ruins, danger hiding beyond every horizon. Few travelers realize how much work is required to preserve peace, how many threats are stopped before ordinary people ever hear about them. Glorfindel spends centuries performing exactly that task. The quiet work of protection, the work that rarely appears in songs, the work that often matters most. His presence alone becomes a source of reassurance, not merely because he is powerful, because he embodies continuity. The kingdoms may change, the roads may crumble, yet Glorfindel remains steady, reliable, unshaken. The traveler can understand why Elrond valued him so highly. Both had witnessed immense loss. Both carried memories stretching back to the Elder Days. Both understood how fragile peace truly was. Together, they helped preserve a small corner of beauty amid an increasingly uncertain world. And increasingly, that uncertainty centers upon a single enemy, the Witch King. The traveler notices an interesting contrast. The Witch King represents fear. Glorfindel represents hope. The Witch King spreads despair wherever he rides. Glorfindel inspires courage. The Witch King serves domination. Glorfindel serves protection. In many ways, they are opposites. Their paths seem destined to cross. And eventually, they do. The wars against Angmar intensify. Battles reshape the north. Kingdoms stand upon the brink of collapse. The final confrontation approaches. A confrontation that will produce one of the most famous prophecies in Tolkien's legendarium. A prophecy so well known that many fans remember the words, without remembering who spoke them. Yet, it is Glorfindel. Not Gandalf. Not Elrond. The Lord who once fell fighting a Balrog. The hero who returned from the Blessed Realm. The guardian of Rivendell. And soon, upon a battlefield far from Gondolin, he will make a prediction that echoes across centuries. Prediction concerning the fate of the Witch King himself. One that will remain unfulfilled until the very end of the War of the Ring. Let us remain in the north a little longer. The ruins of Arnor still lie scattered across the wilderness. Ancient roads disappear beneath grass and moss. Forgotten towers watch over empty hills. The kingdom that once stood here is nearing its end. And at the center of its troubles stands the Witch King of Angmar. For generations, he has been the great enemy of the North, a shadow moving behind wars and invasions, a ruler of fear, a servant of Sauron, whose patience rivals that of his master. The traveler imagines the long struggle, year after year, battle after battle, the kingdoms of men gradually shrinking beneath relentless pressure. Defenses fail, strongholds fall, hope becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. Yet even during these dark years, resistance continues. The free peoples do not surrender easily. Elves fight beside men. Old alliances endure. And among the defenders rides Glorfindel. By now, he has become something more than a warrior, more than a lord. He is a figure of legend, walking among ordinary history. Most people he encounters know only fragments of his story. They do not know Gondolin. They do not know the mountain pass. They do not know the Blessed Realm. Yet, they sense something unusual, something ancient, something powerful. The traveler remembers Tolkien's descriptions of great elves. Their presence often seems brighter than that of ordinary people, not literally, spiritually, as though a deeper light shines through them. Few embodied that quality more strongly than Glorfindel, and nowhere becomes more apparent than during the final war against Angmar. The conflict reaches its climax upon the plains near Fornost, the last capital of the Northern Kingdom. The battle is fierce. The armies of Angmar fight desperately. The defenders fight even harder. The future of the North hangs in the balance. At last, the Witch King's forces break. Defeat spreads through their ranks. The armies of Angmar collapse. Victory belongs to the defenders. Yet, one final task remains. The Witch King himself escapes the battlefield. The Lord of the Nazgul flees. Many pursue him. Among them rides Eärnur of Gondor, a proud and courageous prince who later becomes king. The traveler imagines the scene, the battlefield fading behind them, the enemy retreating into the distance. horse hooves thundering across open ground. The Witch King, still dangerous despite defeat, still feared despite failure. Eärnur seeks glory, a final victory, the destruction of the enemy leader. But before he can reach him, another rider intervenes, Glorfindel. The traveler notices something remarkable here. This moment lasts only a short time in Tolkien's histories, yet its consequences echo for over 1,000 years. Glorfindel sees something others do not through calculation, not through strategy, through foresight. One of those mysterious glimpses beyond ordinary understanding, occasionally granted to the great among the Eldar. The Witch King turns and departs. He is not captured, he is not slain, and Eärnur is frustrated. A dangerous enemy has escaped. The opportunity appears lost. Yet Glorfindel remains calm. And then he speaks the words that become legend, not in anger, not dramatically, simply as a statement of fact. He says, "Far off yet is his doom, and not by the hand of man will he fall." The traveler pauses here, because these words become one of the most famous prophecies in Middle-earth. At the time, few understand their significance. The Witch King survives. History continues. The moment passes. Yet Glorfindel's prediction remains, waiting patiently for centuries. The traveler imagines Eärnur hearing those words, perhaps confused, perhaps unconvinced. The future remains hidden. Only Glorfindel seems to perceive part of its shape. The Witch King's story is not ending here. His fate lies elsewhere, in another age, upon another battlefield. The years continue passing. The kingdoms of the north finally disappear. The last remnants of Arnor fade into history. Yet Rivendell endures, and Glorfindel remains there, watching, waiting, protecting. His role increasingly resembles that of a guardian, standing at the edge of history. Others rise and fall around him. Kings come and go. Wars begin and end. Still, he remains. The traveler reflects upon how unusual his life has become. A lord of Gondolin, a slayer of a Balrog, a traveler returned from death, a defender of Arnor, a prophet whose words will shape future ages. Few characters in Tolkien's world possess such an extraordinary journey. Yet Glorfindel never appears interested in fame. That may be the most remarkable thing of all. The prophecy spreads gradually. Stories preserve it. Generations remember it. Meanwhile, Glorfindel continues his work, quietly, without fanfare. Exactly as he always has. The centuries drift onward. The Third Age approaches its final years. The shadow of Sauron grows once more. The ring waits to be found, and far away in the Shire, events begin unfolding that will eventually draw all the great powers of Middle-earth into one final struggle. The traveler knows what comes next. The roads, the Nazgul, the wounded ring-bearer, and a rider in white whose arrival changes everything. For when Frodo Baggins desperately needs help, one of the oldest heroes in Middle-earth will ride out to meet him. And once again, Glorfindel will stand between darkness and those who cannot face it alone. Let us leave the fallen kingdoms behind. The centuries pass like drifting leaves upon a river. The wars against Angmar become history. The prophecy concerning the Witch King settles into legend. The world changes once again. And now, at last, we approach the events most familiar to readers of The Lord of the Rings. The Third Age is ending. The shadow of Sauron is rising. Far to the east, dark armies gather. Far to the west, an unsuspecting hobbit carries the most dangerous object in Middle-earth. And somewhere between them rides Glorfindel. The traveler notices something fascinating about this period. By now, Glorfindel is unimaginably old. Not merely old by mortal standards, ancient, even among the Eldar. He remembers Gondolin. He remembers the First Age. He remembers a world that vanished thousands of years ago. Most people around him know those events only through songs. Yet for Glorfindel, they remain memories. Still, he does not dwell in the past. His attention remains fixed upon the present, upon the dangers unfolding around Rivendell, upon the growing threat of the Nazgul, upon the strange reports arriving from the western lands, reports concerning a ring. The traveler imagines Rivendell during these uneasy weeks. The last homely house remains peaceful. Its rivers sing beneath the stars. Its gardens glow beneath autumn sunlight. Yet, beneath that tranquility lies concern. Messengers arrive. News spreads. The wise begin realizing that events are moving faster than expected. The enemy is searching. The Nazgul ride openly. The hunt has begun. And then comes the message. A hobbit named Frodo Baggins is approaching Rivendell. Wounded, pursued, running out of time. The traveler remembers that in Tolkien's original story, it is Glorfindel, not Arwen, who rides out to find him. This detail often surprises modern audiences, yet it fits perfectly. When Rivendell requires a rider capable of facing the Nazgul, Glorfindel is an obvious choice. Few beings in Middle-earth possess greater spiritual strength. Few inspire greater fear among the servants of Sauron. The traveler imagines the moment he departs. The autumn air is cool. The leaves shimmer gold and red among the trees. The roads ahead are uncertain. Danger waits beyond every hill. Yet Glorfindel rides calmly, confidently. Not because the situation is safe, because courage has become second nature to him. The years have taught him something important. Fear serves little purpose when duty calls. The journey carries him westward through the wilderness. the land grows quieter. The signs of danger become easier to spot. Broken branches, disturbed earth. The subtle traces left by riders moving swiftly through the wild. The Nazgul are near. The traveler can almost feel the tension building. The ringwraiths terrify nearly everyone they encounter. Even experienced warriors struggle to face them. Quote, "Their presence chills the air. Their voices inspire dread. Their very existence seems designed to crush hope. Yet Glorfindel approaches them without hesitation." Tolkien later hints at something remarkable. When Frodo sees Glorfindel through eyes partly opened to the unseen world, he perceives the elf differently. Not merely as a noble warrior, as a being of light, a radiant figure shining with spiritual power. The traveler pauses here because this detail reveals just how extraordinary Glorfindel truly is. The Nazgul inhabit both the seen and unseen worlds. They perceive realities hidden from ordinary eyes. And in that realm, Glorfindel appears terrifying to them. Not because he is cruel, because his spirit burns brightly. Bright enough to challenge creatures born of shadow. The search continues. The roads twist through forests and hills. Time grows short. Every hour matters. And finally, Glorfindel finds the travelers. Frodo, Aragorn, the companions struggling desperately toward Rivendell. The wounded ring-bearer weakens with every passing day. The Morgul blade works its poison slowly. Without help, he will never reach safety. The traveler imagines the relief of that moment, the sudden appearance of a powerful ally, the realization that hope remains, the knowledge that Rivendell is finally within reach. Glorfindel wastes no time. There is too much at stake. His horse, Asphalothe, is among the swiftest in Middle-earth, strong, fearless, capable of outrunning the Nazgul themselves. The wounded Frodo is placed upon its back. The race toward Rivendell begins. And for one final time in his long life, the Lord of the House of the Golden Flower prepares to stand against the servants of darkness. Not upon the walls of Gondolin, not upon a mountain pass, but beside a river that will soon become one of the most famous locations in Tolkien's entire legendarium. For the Nazgul are coming. The chase has begun, and Glorfindel intends to make certain that Frodo reaches Rivendell alive. The race toward Rivendell has begun. Autumn winds sweep through the trees. The roads narrow. The shadows lengthen beneath the hills. And somewhere behind them ride the Nine, the Nazgul, the most feared servants of Sauron. For Frodo, every mile has become a struggle. The wound upon his shoulder grows worse with each passing day. The world around him feels distant, dreamlike, as though he is slowly slipping between two realities. The traveler remembers that this is precisely what the Morgul blade was designed to do. Not merely to kill, to transform, to draw its victim into the shadow world inhabited by the ringwraiths. Time is running out. Glorfindel knows this. Aragorn knows this. Every moment matters, and so the company presses onward toward the ford of Bruinen, the final crossing before Rivendell, the final barrier between the ring-bearer and his pursuers. The traveler imagines the urgency of those hours, the forests rushing past, the sound of hooves upon the road, the distant sense of danger growing stronger. The enemy is close, very close. Yet, through it all, Glorfindel remains calm, the same calmness that carried him through Gondolin, the same calmness that carried him into battle against a Balrog. Thousands of years have passed since those events, yet his character has not changed. Duty first, fear later, if fear comes at all. The traveler notices something remarkable about Glorfindel's role here. He does not dominate the story. He does not seek attention. He simply appears when he is needed most, as he has done throughout his entire life. A guardian, a protector. A servant of hope. The road descends toward the river. The sound of rushing water grows louder. The ford of Bruinen lies ahead. Safety lies ahead. But so do the Nazgul. The ringwraiths emerge behind Frodo at last. Dark riders, dark horses, dark cloaks fluttering in the wind. The servants of Sauron have nearly completed their hunt. The traveler imagines the scene, the river glimmering before them, the ringwraiths closing from behind. The wounded ring-bearer struggling to remain conscious. The tension feels almost unbearable. Yet, Glorfindel does not panic, because some battles are won long before they begin. The Nazgul fear many things: fire, water, the power of the elves. But perhaps most importantly, they fear beings who exist strongly in both the seen and unseen worlds. And Glorfindel is one of those beings. The traveler remembers Tolkien's own descriptions. To ordinary eyes, Glorfindel appears noble and beautiful. To the Nazgul, he appears far more frightening. A figure of radiant power, a light burning against the darkness. The sort of opponent they would prefer to avoid. The chase reaches its climax. Frodo crosses the ford. The Nazgul follow. And then comes one of the most iconic moments in all of Tolkien's mythology. The flood. The waters of Bruinen rise. Great waves rush down the valley. The river transforms into a force of overwhelming power. The ringwraiths are swept away, their horses destroyed, their pursuit shattered. The traveler pauses for a moment, because this victory belongs to many people. Elrond, Gandalf, the hidden power of Rivendell. Yet Glorfindel plays an essential role. Without him, Frodo never reaches the ford. Without him, the ring may never reach Rivendell. Without him, the entire story changes. And that feels fitting. For thousands of years, Glorfindel has stood quietly at the edge of great events. Rarely the central figure, always important, always present when courage is needed. The traveler watches the river settle once more. The floodwaters recede. The danger passes. Frodo's long journey to Rivendell finally ends. and Glorfindel's role in The Lord of the Rings largely fades from view. Many readers have wondered why. Why does such a powerful figure not join the Fellowship? Why does he remain behind? The answer reveals much about his character. Glorfindel is not a hero seeking adventures. He serves where he is most useful. The wise understand that every person has a role. His role is not to carry the ring, not to march into Mordor. His role is to guard, to guide, to protect. Exactly as he has always done. The traveler now looks back across the long centuries of his life. The shining streets of Gondolin, the banners of the House of the Golden Flower, the burning city, the mountain pass, the Balrog, death, Valinor, his return, the wars of Arnor, the prophecy of the Witch King, the roads leading to Rivendell, the rescue of Frodo. It is an astonishing journey, perhaps one of the greatest in Tolkien's entire legendarium. And yet, Glorfindel rarely receives the attention given to other heroes. Perhaps that is why his story feels so special. He does not seek glory. He does not seek power. He does not seek remembrance. Again and again, he simply places himself between danger and those who need protection. That is the thread connecting every chapter of his life. Not strength, not fame, service. The traveler imagines Rivendell at evening, the river singing beneath the stars, the valley peaceful once more. Somewhere among its halls walks an elf who remembers Gondolin, an elf who has crossed death and returned, an elf whose courage helped shape the fate of Middle-earth across 3 different ages. Most travelers passing through Rivendell would never fully understand who he was. Most would see only a noble elf lord, but the reader knows better. The reader has followed the road from the first age to the 3rd, and in doing so has discovered something remarkable, that one of Tolkien's greatest heroes was never a king, never a conqueror, never a ruler of vast realms. He was simply Glorfindel, the Lord of the Golden Flower, the slayer of a Balrog, the elf who returned, and one of the brightest lights ever to shine in Middle-earth. Before the sun, before the moon, when Middle-earth lay beneath starlight alone. In those ancient days, the elves awoke beside the waters of Quevian men. There were no kingdoms, no great cities, only starlight reflected in still waters, and wonder. The first elves opened their eyes to a silent world. They saw stars before they saw sunlight, and perhaps because of that, starlight remained forever sacred to them. Among those first generations arose 3 great kindreds, the Vanya, the Noldor, and the Teleri. Círdan belonged to the Teleri. This matters deeply. For of all the elven kindreds, the Teleri loved water most. They loved rivers, lakes, rain, and above all, the sea. Even before many of them had seen it, something within them longed for distant shores. They were patient where others were restless, gentle where others were proud, slow to anger, slow to haste, but deep in feeling. Círdan inherited all these qualities. Even in the earliest songs, he is not remembered as the strongest or most dazzling among the Eldar. He is remembered differently, steady, reliable, enduring. These qualities rarely attract attention in youth, but ages later, they become priceless. When the Valar summoned the Elves westward, many began the great journey. A migration unlike anything the world had seen. Across vast lands they traveled. Mountains, forests, rivers, uncounted leagues beneath endless stars. Many turned aside. Some refused the journey. Others pressed onward. Among the Teleri walked one elf who listened carefully to every river, every wind, every distant sound. Círdan. Though young by elven measure, he already carried unusual patience. Others looked ahead. He noticed what remained behind. Others sought glory. He noticed duty. Even then, something about him felt different. As the journey continued westward, the longing within the Teleri deepened, not merely for destination, for water, for shores, for something they could feel but not yet name. And at last, they heard it, a sound no song had prepared them for. The sea, the endless rhythm of waves meeting shore, the deep voice of Balrog. When the Teleri first beheld the great sea, many stood speechless. Some wept, some laughed, some felt as though they had found a forgotten part of themselves. Círdan stood among them, and something changed forever. Others saw beauty. Círdan saw calling, not ambition, not power, purpose. He did not know it yet, but from this moment onward, the sea would shape his entire existence. For while kings would rise and kingdoms would fall, Círdan would remain by the water, watching, waiting, building the paths that carried others home. From that day onward, the sea was no longer merely something Círdan had seen. It became part of him. Its rhythm entered his thoughts. Its voice lingered even in silence. The endless rise and fall of waves seemed to speak of something older than language, something ancient, something eternal. The Teleri remained long upon the shores, longer than the Vanyar, longer than the Noldor. This too suited their nature. They were never a people of haste. Where others moved quickly toward destiny, the Teleri paused to listen, to feel, to understand. They learned the moods of the sea, the changing winds, the pull of tides, the language of gulls and salt and storm. And among them, Círdan became increasingly drawn not only to the beauty of the waters, but to what the waters required: craft, skill, patience. He began studying wood differently, not merely as timber, as possibility. A fallen tree became more than wood and bark. It became shape, curvature, structure, buoyancy. He learned how grain bent under pressure, how certain woods resisted water, how weight could be balanced against movement. None of this came from formal teaching. No master shipwright yet existed, because no ships yet existed. Círdan was learning from observation, from the sea itself. This is what made him extraordinary. Many elves admired the sea. Círdan understood it. The difference mattered. As years passed, another longing grew among the Teleri: to cross, to move upon the waters rather than nearly beside them. But the sea was vast, beautiful, yes, yet unforgiving. A single mistake upon open water could mean death. Most hesitated. Círdan did not. Where others saw danger, he saw a challenge worthy of patience. He began shaping the earliest vessels. Simple at first, small craft, frames of carefully chosen wood, bound and sealed with methods learned through experimentation. Not elegant, not yet, but functional. The first boats touched the water and floated. The moment changed history. Because a boat is more than wood, it is possibility made tangible. It is the promise that distance may be crossed, that separation need not remain permanent, that horizons can be approached. The Teleri marveled. Some stepped into the small craft nervously, others with excitement. The waters carried them, and something awakened among the sea elves. A future. Though he did not yet bear the title, Círdan had already come what history would remember. A shipwright, not merely a builder of vessels, a builder of passage, a maker of journeys. That distinction would define his life. For countless ages to come, Círdan would build not for conquest, but for crossing. Not for war, but for passage. Not to carry armies, but souls. The years continued. Many of the Teleri eventually crossed into Aman. Many entered the Blessed Realm. Yet not all departed at once. Some lingered, some delayed. Some remained behind, and among those who remained, Círdan's purpose only deepened. He discovered something profound. Not everyone travels at the same pace. Not everyone is ready to depart when others are. Some hesitate, some fear change. Some must stay behind to help others move forward. That realization shaped him more deeply than any craft. Círdan began to understand a quiet truth. There are those who lead from the front, and there are those who remain behind, so no one is left alone. He belonged to the second kind. This is why Círdan feels so different from other legendary elves. Fëanor burned brightly. Galadriel radiated power and wisdom. Gil-galad stood as king. Elrond became counselor and healer. But Círdan remained, always near the shore, always ensuring others could continue their journey. He became something rare even among the Eldar, a guardian of thresholds, a keeper of departures, one who stood between lands, between ages, between staying and leaving. As centuries passed, his appearance changed in a way unusual among elves. Tolkien notes something extraordinary about Círdan. He wore a beard, a rare sign among elves, an outward reflection of immense age. Age not measured in weakness, but in long endurance, in patience accumulated over ages beyond counting. And still he waited by the sea. Still he built. Still he watched horizons. Kings would later seek his counsel. Great lords would honor him. Ring-bearers would trust him. But those stories lay far ahead. For now, Círdan remained what he had become beside the first shores, an elf shaped by water and waking, a craftsman of passage, a servant of quiet duty. And as the first age approached with all its fire and sorrow, Círdan would find that his calling had only just begun. For soon, the world would need ships unlike any ever built before. Ships not for exploration, not for beauty, but for survival. The first age came not as a single storm, but as gathering thunder. Far in the north, darkness rose once more. Morgoth returned to Middle-earth in power. His fortresses multiplied. His armies spread. The long peace shattered. Kingdoms that had barely begun to flourish suddenly found themselves living beneath shadow. War came, fire came, sorrow came, and like so many of the Eldar, Círdan watched the world change around him. Yet even as war consumed vast lands, his purpose remained tied to the sea. By now, he had become lord among his people, not through conquest, not through ambition, but through trust. The Teleri looked to him because he had become what few could ever become: steady. In ages of chaos, steadiness becomes priceless. It was during these years that Círdan settled upon the western shores of Beleriand. There, near the great waters, he established the havens of the Falas, Breathembar, Eglarest, ports of refuge, cities of ships, and salt and sea wind. They were unlike the grand hidden kingdoms of the Noldor. No towering mountain walls, no secret valleys, no glittering underground halls. Instead, the Falas lived openly beside the waves. The cries of seabirds filled the air. Harbors stretched into gray waters. White foam broke against weathered stone. And everywhere there were ships, more ships than Middle-earth had ever seen. Círdan's craft had matured beyond anything imagined in earlier ages. The small boats of his youth were now memories. His vessels had become elegant and strong. High-prowed ships that cut through rough waters. Broad vessels capable of carrying many souls. Swift ships that danced with the wind. Wood bent beneath his hands as though it remembered the sea. Sails caught air like living wings. Ropes, timber, mast, and sail became instruments of harmony. He did not merely build ships, he understood them. Each vessel was a balance, weight and lift, strength and flexibility, control and surrender. To sail well meant respecting the sea, never trying to dominate it. This philosophy reflected Círdan himself. He did not seek mastery through force. He worked with what was, never against its nature. That wisdom made him beloved. But the havens were not merely centers of craft. They became sanctuaries. And that role grew more important with every passing year. As Morgoth's wars worsened, refugees began arriving. Families fleeing ruined settlements, messengers carrying terrible news, wounded soldiers, lost children, the displaced, the grieving. All came west, and at the shores, Círdan received them, again and again. The havens became places of last hope. This became one of the defining truths of Círdan's life. He was rarely at the center of great battles, yet he stood at the place where survivors arrived afterward. History often remembers warriors. It remembers kings who charge into battle. It remembers shining victories and legendary duels. But there is another kind of hero. The one waiting at the shore, the one who receives the broken, the one who ensures survivors still have somewhere to go. That was Círdan, again and again, through siege, through defeat, through loss. He remained. The wars of Beleriand grew increasingly desperate. Great realms fell, heroes perished. Entire peoples vanished. Still, the havens endured for a time. But even sanctuaries attract shadow. Morgoth understood something simple. Hope survives where refuge survives. Destroy the refuge, and despair spreads. So the Thalas became targets. The assault came with terrible force. Armies of orcs descended upon the coast. Fire reached the harbors. The cries of battle missed with crashing waves. Ships burned. Walls fell. Brithambar fell. Eglarest fell. The havens were broken. The cities Círdan had built were lost. Another kingdom erased by war. Many would have broken then. Many would have surrendered to grief. Círdan did not. This is perhaps his most remarkable quality. He endured loss without losing purpose. The cities were gone. The calling remained. So he gathered survivors, loaded ships, rescued those he could, and withdrew to the Isle of Balar. There, amid uncertainty and sorrow, he began again, once more. That phrase follows Círdan through every age. Begin again, build again, wait again, hope again. The Isle of Balar became the new refuge, a final sanctuary in the dying world. And there, amid refugees and fading hope, Círdan built some of the most important ships in all the Elder Days. Because soon, one mariner would arrive carrying a destiny greater than any before. A mariner whose voyage would change the fate of elves and men alike. His name was Arundel, and Círdan would help carry his hope across the sea. The Isle of Balar became a refuge for the weary, not a kingdom of splendor, not a fortress of glory, but a place where hope still breathed. Ships came and went across gray waters. Refugees arrived carrying grief. And through all of it, Círdan remained as he always had, steady, patient, watching the sea. It was there that Arundel came often, young at first, restless, driven by a longing few fully understood. Even among elves and men, there was something different about him. He seemed born for horizons, born for distant waters, born for a journey no one else could complete. Círdan recognized this. Some souls were shaped for waiting, others for voyaging. Arundel belonged to the second kind, so Círdan helped him. He built for him a ship unlike any before, Gil-galad, foam flower, swift, graceful, strong enough for waters no ordinary vessel could survive. This was no ordinary commission. Even before the voyage began, something about it felt larger than craft, larger than shipbuilding. Destiny had entered the harbor. When Arundel sailed west, he carried more than his own hope. He carried the final plea of a broken world, the plea of elves and men who could no longer endure Morgoth's shadow. And because one ship could cross impossible waters, history changed. The Valar heard, the War of Wrath came, Morgoth fell, the First Age ended, the world changed once more. Beleriand sank beneath the sea, entire kingdoms vanished forever. Rivers disappeared, mountains broke, cities were swallowed by water. What generations had known as homeland became memory. And once again, Círdan watched the world reshape itself. By now, He had seen this pattern many times. Rise, beauty, loss, silence. Most beings struggle with change. Círdan lived through so much of it that change became almost like weather. Painful, yes, but inevitable. He learned something rare, how to mourn without becoming bitter. That wisdom made him unlike nearly anyone else in Middle-earth. When the Second Age began, many elves faced a choice: return west or remain. Many departed. Many sailed toward Valinor at last. Círdan could have gone. No one would have questioned it. He had endured more than most, served longer than Miriel. Surely he had earned rest, yet he remained. This decision reveals the heart of Círdan more clearly than anything else. He stayed because others still needed passage, others still needed guidance, others still needed a harbor. As long as souls remained in Middle-earth longing for the sea, someone needed to wait at the shore. So Círdan built again. He established new havens, the Grey Havens. Mithlond, there upon the western shores of Lindon, his greatest harbor rose, became a place unlike any other in Middle-earth, not merely a port, a threshold, a place between worlds. Those arriving felt peace, those departing felt sorrow, and Círdan stood at the meeting point of both. The Grey Havens carried a strange beauty. White gulls wheeled through salt-heavy air. Tall masts swayed gently with the tides. The sound of ropes creaking in sea wind became constant music. Mist rolled over quiet waters at dawn. At sunset, the western horizon burned gold, and always there were ships. Waiting, the Second Age brought great powers. Numenor rose from the sea. Its kings became mighty, its fleets unmatched. Elven realms flushed. Gil-galad ruled in Lindon. Sauron rose once more. Kingdoms formed and fell. Wars returned. Ages passed. Still, Círdan remained. This is what makes his story so haunting. Most famous figures in Tolkien's legendarium blaze brightly. Fëanor burns like fire. Gandalf arrives in dramatic turning points. Aragorn carries destiny. Círdan does something quieter. He endures. Century after century, he watches generations become dust. Kings he advises die. Children he once welcomed become legends. Then forgotten names. Still he remains by the sea, waiting. The waiting itself becomes sacred. Not passive waiting, purposeful waiting. He understands something few others do. Not every great deed is action. Some are patience, some are remaining. Some are simply being present when the moment finally arrives. And Círdan would wait for one such moment. A moment in the Third Age. A ship arriving from the west, bearing not kings, not armies, but 5 old men. 5 strangers cloaked as wanderers. Of all the great and wise in Middle-earth, Círdan alone would immediately understand what one of them truly was. And in that recognition, he would shape the fate of the world once again. The Third Age had not yet begun, but the shadow had already returned. Sauron rose once more in the Second Age, not with the raw violence of Morgoth, but with patience and cunning. He deceived, he whispered, he promised power. Kingdoms that had survived one darkness now found themselves threatened by another. And in Lindon, beside the Western Sea, two of the wisest elves in Middle-earth stood watch, Gil-galad and Círdan. Their friendship was not built upon spectacle, not upon dramatic moments sung by minstrels. It was built upon something quieter. Trust, deep trust forged over centuries. Gil-galad ruled as High King of the Noldor, young by Círdan's standards, though ancient beyond mortal comprehension. Wise, noble, far-seeing, he carried the burden of kingship with grace. And yet, even kings need counsel, especially the wise ones, perhaps most of all the wise ones. Círdan became one of Gil-galad's most trusted allies. This reveals much about both of them. Gil-galad possessed brilliance, leadership, strength, but Círdan possessed perspective. He had lived through ages beyond counting. He remembered the elder days. He remembered Morgoth. He remembered what unchecked darkness became when ignored too long. Where younger rulers might react to immediate danger, Círdan saw patterns across centuries. That kind of wisdom cannot be learned quickly. It is earned through endurance. This made him invaluable. When rumors spread of strange movements in the east, Círdan noticed. When travelers brought uneasy news, Círdan listened. When shadows lengthened where peace once lived, Círdan remembered. He had seen this before. Darkness rarely returns loudly. It begins at the edges, in whispers, in subtle changes, in the uneasy feeling that something old is waking. Sauron eventually revealed himself openly. War followed. The War of the Elves and Sauron reshaped the age. Kingdoms burned. Edrian fell. Celebrimbor perished. Once more, the free peoples stood upon the edge of ruin, and once more, Círdan remained where he was needed, at the havens, at Lindon, beside Gil-galad. The Grey Havens became more than a port. They became lifelines. Supplies moved through them. Refugees arrived through them. Communication with allies depended upon them. Without Círdan, the western defenses of Lindon would have weakened catastrophically. But he endured, as always. When Numenor sent aid against Sauron, Círdan witnessed another turning point. Men had grown mighty, very mighty. Their ships rivaled even the greatest works of the Eldar. Many elves looked upon Numenor with admiration, some with concern. Some with concern. Círdan felt both. He understood a truth many ignored. Greatness often carries temptation. Power invites pride. Pride invites ruin. And sadly, time proved him right. Numenor fell. Another mighty realm lost to arrogance. Another catastrophe swallowed by the sea. For Círdan, the tragedy carried familiar sorrow. Again, he watched greatness collapse. Again, he watched survivors flee ruin. Again, he helped receive the broken. Elendil and the faithful came to Middle-earth. And once more, Círdan stood at the threshold between ending and beginning. This became the strange rhythm of his life. Others saw endings. He saw transitions. When one age died, he prepared for the next. When one kingdom fell, he helped shelter what remained. The last alliance came. Gil-galad marched east. Elendil marched beside him. Armies gathered. The final great war of the Second Age began. And for one of the few times in his long existence, Círdan did not march to the center of the war. He remained behind. Some might misunderstand this. Some might think absence meant lesser importance. But Círdan understood duty better than glory. Not every wise leader belongs on the battlefield. Some must preserve what survives. Some must ensure there remains a world worth saving. So he stayed at the havens, watching the western sea, waiting. Then news came. Victory and grief. Sauron had fallen, but Gil-galad was dead. The last High King of the Noldor had perished. An age ended. The news struck deeply. Few losses could wound the Eldar more. Gil-galad had been more than king. He had been one of the last great bridges to the Elder Days. Now he too was gone, and Círdan remained. Again, he outlived yet another king, another friend, another age. This, perhaps, was the loneliest burden of immortality. Not endless life, endless farewell. Again and again, Círdan watched those he loved depart. Still he remained. Still he waited. Still he served. By the dawn of the Third Age, only a handful remained who remembered the oldest days. Among them, Círdan stood as one of the eldest, quiet, ancient, bearded. The Third Age began in uneasy peace. Sauron had fallen, his body destroyed, his army scattered, Barad-dûr broken. And yet, among the wisest in Middle-earth, few believed the danger had truly ended. Círdan certainly did not. He had lived too long to mistake silence for safety. He understood something history had taught him again and again. Darkness rarely disappears forever. It retreats, it regathers, it waits. So while kingdoms rebuilt and mortals spoke of victory, Círdan continued his quiet watch at the Grey Havens. The sea remained unchanged. Waves rolled upon the shore. Gulls cried above white masts. Ships came and went. But the shipwright had learned to listen not only to the sea, but to the world itself. And after long centuries, he felt something stirring once more. Not darkness, something else. A movement from the west. A purpose carried across the sea. Then, one day, a ship arrived. It came not as a war fleet, not with banners, not with kings, only a quiet vessel crossing silver waters. Upon it were 5 figures, old men. At least, that is how they appeared, bent with age, clothed as wanderers, carrying staffs, no crowns, no armor, no outward majesty. To nearly any other observer, they would have seemed ordinary, strange, perhaps, but ordinary. Círdan knew better. The moment he beheld them, he understood. These were no mortal men. No wandering sages, no simple pilgrims. They were Maiar, spirits of the same order as Sauron, ancient beings clothed in mortal form, sent from the Blessed Realm, sent by the Vala. This recognition reveals perhaps more about Círdan's wisdom than almost any other moment in his story. None of the younger races could have perceived this immediately. Few among the Eldar could. But Círdan had spent ages learning to see beyond appearances. He understood that true greatness often arrives quietly, not with spectacle, not with power displayed openly, but with purpose hidden beneath humility. Of the five, one drew his attention most strongly. Not the tallest, not the most imposing, not the most commanding. An old wanderer, clothed in gray, his face weathered, his frame lean, his appearance almost unremarkable beside the others. Yet within him burned something extraordinary: compassion, pity, resolve, a quiet fire. This was Gandalf. Though he had not yet become known by that name among men, Círdan looked upon him and saw what others would take centuries to understand. Not merely wisdom, hope. He perceived that this gray wanderer would bear burdens beyond measure, that he would walk among the weak, aid the humble, strengthen the fearful, and resist the temptation of domination. That mattered greatly, for Círdan had seen power corrupt even the mighty. He had watched kings fall, realms collapse, greatness become pride. What he saw in Gandalf was different. Strength without hunger for control. Power restrained by compassion. Wisdom tempered by mercy. Rare qualities, perhaps the rarest. And so Círdan did something extraordinary. He gave away one of the greatest treasures in Middle-earth, Narya, the Ring of Fire. One of the 3 elven rings. A treasure entrusted originally to him, a relic of immense power. He surrendered it freely, not reluctantly, not after long hesitation, freely. This tells us everything about Círdan. He never clung to power for its own sake. He valued purpose above possession. He understood that a gift becomes meaningful only when placed where it is most needed. And he knew Gandalf would need it. The Ring of Fire held a subtle power, not domination, not conquest. Its strength lay elsewhere. It inspired courage, kindled hope, strengthened hearts against despair. Could any gift have suited Gandalf better, or any decision reflected Círdan more perfectly? The oldest shipwright in Middle-earth recognized the one who would carry hope into the darkest places, and he equipped him, not with armies, not with titles, with fire, the inner fire that resists surrender. As Gandalf departed the havens, Círdan gave him words that would echo through the ages. He told him that though his labors would be heavy, he would aid all hearts willing to resist tyranny. It was not merely blessing, it was recognition. One ancient guardian of hope recognizing another. After the Astari departed, Círdan returned to the shore, as he always did, watching, waiting. Ages passed again. Kingdoms shifted. Arnor fell. Gondor weakened. The shadow returned. And still the shipwright remained. By now, His life had stretched across nearly all recorded history of Middle-earth. He had seen stars before the sun. He had seen the Elder Days. He had watched the first, second, and third ages unfold. And through all of it, he remained what he had always been, a keeper of passage, a guardian of endings, a steward of departures. But one final duty remained, the greatest and most bittersweet of all. For the time was approaching when the last great ships would sail west, and soon Círdan himself would finally depart. At last, the War of the Ring came to its end. The One Ring was destroyed. Sauron fell. Barad-dûr collapsed into ruin, and with its fall, the Third Age drew toward its final twilight. Across Middle-earth, there was celebration. Cities rejoiced. Kingdoms began to heal. The long shadow had passed. Yet, among the Eldar, victory carried another feeling. Not sorrow, not grief alone. Something quieter. Completion. For the elves understood what many among men did not. Sauron's fall did not restore the old world. It marked its ending. The age of elves in Middle-earth was passing. Magic itself had begun to fade. The ancient power that once preserved hidden realms, protected enchanted forests, and sustained timeless beauty was diminishing. Lothlorien would fade. Rivendell would empty. The great elven kingdoms would become memory. The dominion of men had begun, and at the Grey Havens, Círdan already knew. He had known for a long time. This was the ending he had waited for across 3 ages. The final departures had begun. One by one, the great Eldar came to the western shores. Not as rulers, not as warriors, but as weary travelers at the end of long journeys. Galadriel came. Elrond came. Ancient powers whose names had shaped history now arrived not in triumph, but in peace. The great stories were ending, the old songs nearing their final note. And as always, Círdan waited at the shore. The same shore, the same sea, the same endless horizon. Only now, he no longer waited merely for others. He waited for himself. Then came one final company, small, quiet, almost humble. And yet, among them walked those who had carried the fate of the world. Bilbo, old beyond ordinary hobbit years, fragile but gentle. Frodo, wounded in ways no healer could fully mend. Gandalf, still gray, still calm, still carrying the quiet fire Círdan had recognized long ago. And beside them stood Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Friends bound by love stronger than war. The evening air was cool. Waves rolled softly against the harbor. White gulls drifted in the fading light. There was no grand ceremony, no crowds, only stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when words are too small. Círdan watched them approach, and perhaps, after thousands upon thousands of years, he felt something almost unfamiliar, the weight of finality. For among those approaching was Gandalf, The pilgrim he had welcomed centuries earlier, the wanderer to whom he had entrusted Narya, and now that wanderer returned, his task complete. The old shipwright looked upon him and knew. The mission of the Istari had ended. Hope had endured. The fire had not gone out. Círdan's faith had been justified. Gandalf had done what he was sent to do. He had not conquered. He had guided. He had awakened courage in the small and humble. Just as Círdan had foreseen, there is something deeply beautiful in this symmetry. Long ago, Círdan welcomed Gandalf to Middle-earth. Now he welcomed him home. A full circle across centuries. Perhaps that is why Círdan's story feels so different from others. He was never the center of the great battles. He stood at beginnings and endings, at arrivals and departures, at thresholds, always at thresholds. That was his true calling. Not shipwright alone, ferryman of ages, keeper of transitions, guardian of farewell. The ship stood ready, white, elegant, silent upon silver waters, built with mastery refined across ages beyond counting. Perhaps his finest work. Or perhaps every ship had always been practice for this final voyage. The last ship west. The last great departure. Círdan looked once more upon Middle-earth, upon the shores he had guarded since before the sun. He had seen stars before moonlight. He had walked lands now buried beneath oceans. He had known kings whose names were forgotten. He had watched entire civilizations rise and vanish. He had endured Morgoth, Sauron, war, sorrow, loss, farewell after farewell. And still he had remained. Until now. This is perhaps the most moving truth about Círdan. He stayed longer than almost anyone, not because he feared leaving, because others still needed him. He postponed rest for ages beyond counting. He remained so others could depart. He waited so others would not leave alone. What greater act of service exists? At last, there was no more reason to remain. The final great burden had passed. The final great war had ended. The final great travelers had arrived. So Círdan stepped aboard. At last, the oldest mariner of the Eldar, the shipwright, the keeper of havens, the patient guardian of shores. He who had sent countless others west now sailed west himself. The sails caught the wind. The ship moved. Slowly at first, then steadily. Water parted beneath the hull. The gray havens receded. The shores of Middle-earth grew distant. Mist gathered over the sea. The horizon softened, and somewhere beyond mortal sight lay Amen, the blessed realm, home. After all the ages, home. No songs describe exactly what Círdan felt in that final passage, but perhaps none are needed. Some journeys transcend words, and so ended the tale of Círdan the Shipwright. Not with battle, not with glory, not with conquest, but with something truer to who he had always been. A voyage, for in the end, Círdan teaches something rare. Not all heroes change history through force. Some change history through patience, through faithfulness, through remaining when remaining is hard, through helping others reach shores they cannot reach alone. While brighter legends burned and faded, Círdan endured, quietly, steadily, like the sea itself. And perhaps that is why, among all the great lords of Middle-earth, he feels uniquely peaceful. He asks for nothing, claims nothing, seeks no glory. He simply serves and waits until the time comes to sail. The end. The First Age had ended in fire and ruin. The great wars against war over. The ancient lands of Beleriand, home to countless heroes and kingdoms, had largely sunk beneath the sea. Entire realms vanished, mountains disappeared, cities were lost forever. The traveler imagines the silence that followed. After centuries of war, Middle-earth finally knew peace. Not perfect peace, but peace enough for rebuilding. Among the survivors stood the Noldor, the proud and gifted elves who had once followed Feanor into exile. They had built kingdoms, fought impossible wars, endured terrible losses. Now only remnants remained, and these remnants gathered in the western lands of Lindon. Lindon stood near the shores of the Great Sea, a kingdom of harbors, forests, and quiet beauty. The air carried the scent of salt and pine. White ships rested upon calm waters. The cries of seabirds drifted upon ocean winds. For many elves, Lindon felt bittersweet. Beautiful, peaceful, yet haunted by memory. Because across the sea lay Valinor. Home, and beneath the waves lay Beleriand. Loss ruled here. The High King of the Noldor, the last to carry that title. The traveler imagines a young king walking the shores at dawn, waves touching the sand, mist rising above the water. The burden of history resting upon his shoulders. He had inherited more than a crown. He had inherited responsibility. Not merely for a kingdom, for an entire people, for the last great remnant of the Noldor in Middle-earth. And though peace had come, Gil-galad understood something others wished to forget. Darkness rarely disappears forever. Sometimes it merely waits, and somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, something was already beginning to stir. The burden of kingship came early to Gil-galad, perhaps earlier than anyone would have wished. The Second Age had only just begun, yet the old world was already gone. Not changing. Gone. That distinction mattered. The traveler imagines standing upon the western shores of Lindon and looking out across the sea. Beyond the waves lay the straight road to Valinor. Behind lay Middle-earth, a land still scarred by war. For many elves, this created a strange tension. Part of their hearts remained turned westward, toward peace, toward home, toward the blessed realm. Yet, duty held them here, and no one felt that duty more deeply than Gil-galad. He was not merely another Elven lord. He was High King, the last High King of the Noldor remaining in Middle-earth. A title heavy with memory, heavy with triumph, heavy with tragedy. The traveler notices something important about Tolkien's great kings. Their greatness rarely comes from conquest. It comes from endurance, from carrying burdens others cannot see, from remaining steady while entire ages change around him. Gil-galad belonged firmly to that tradition. The surviving records tell us little about his private thoughts, yet his actions reveal much. He ruled Lindon wisely, patiently, without the reckless pride that had doomed earlier generations of the Noldor. That alone made him remarkable. The traveler remembers the history of his people. The Noldor were brilliant, gifted, creative, powerful, but they were also proud, terribly proud. Their greatest strengths had often become their greatest weaknesses. Ambition led to rebellion, pride led to division, oaths led to catastrophe. Gil-galad inherited that history, and unlike many before him, he learned from it. This may have been his greatest gift, not power, wisdom. The wisdom to recognize old mistakes before repeating them. The wisdom to understand that peace required vigilance. The wisdom to know that victory over one Dark Lord did not guarantee permanent safety. The traveler imagines Lindon during those long early centuries, a kingdom of quiet dignity. Elven ships entering peaceful harbors, smiths crafting beautiful works, scholars preserving memories of lost ages, music drifting through halls lit by lanterns and starlight. On the surface, it seems idyllic, and in many ways it is. But beneath that peace runs another current, watchfulness. Gil-galad never fully relaxes, not because he is fearful, because he remembers. He remembers what unchecked darkness can become. He remembers how slowly evil sometimes returns. Let us leave the peaceful shores of Lindon behind. The sea still rolls against white harbors. The gulls still circle above quiet waters. Yet, far to the east, peace is already beginning to unravel. The traveler follows the shadow as it moves across Middle-earth. At first, it has no armies, no towers, no banners, only will, only patience, only purpose. This is what makes Sauron so dangerous. Unlike his master, Morgoth, Sauron rarely begins with brute force. Morgoth corrupted by destruction, Sauron corrupted by order, control, structure, dominion. He does not always wish to burn the world. Often, he wishes to organize it, rule it, perfect it according to his own design. The traveler notices how subtle this difference is and how terrifying, because destruction announces itself. Control often arrives disguised as improvement. This truth becomes central to the Second Age. After Morgoth's defeat, Sauron disappears, or seems to. Many assume he has fled. Some believe he has been destroyed. Others hope he has abandoned his ambitions entirely. Gil-galad never accepts these comforting assumptions, and he is right not to. Because Sauron survives, not merely surviving, planning. The traveler imagines long centuries in the eastern lands, vast plains, broken ruins, ancient fortresses abandoned since the First Age, places few travelers visit. Places perfect for rebuilding power unseen. There, Sauron begins again, carefully, patiently. This may be one of the most frightening aspects of his character. He learns. He adapts. Morgoth wooed through terror and overwhelming force. Sauron studies that failure. He understands something important. Raw power alone creates resistance. Resistance creates alliances. Alliances create enemies capable of victory. So, he chooses a different path. The traveler imagines settlements gradually falling under his influence, not conquered by war, absorbed through leadership, through fear, through promises. Men in the east and south begin following him. Some willingly, some reluctantly. Some because they seek power, some because they seek safety. The distinction matters little in the end. Power grows, influence spreads, the shadow lengthens. The traveler reflects on how evil often expands. Rarely all at once, more often through compromise. One small concession, one rationalization, one acceptance of necessary control. Sauron understands this perfectly. He offers order to chaotic lands, protection to fearful people, strength to ambitious rulers. And gradually, entire regions fall under his influence. Centuries pass. The Eastern world changes. Kingdoms align. Armies form. Roads connect distant strongholds. What once looked like scattered influence becomes something larger. An empire in preparation. And eventually, Sauron chooses a center. A place that will become synonymous with darkness. Mordor. The traveler imagines the land before its transformation. Harsh mountains, volcanic plains, black stone, a natural fortress shaped almost as though the world itself anticipated evil. It is perfect, difficult to invade, easy to defend, strategically powerful. Sauron recognizes its value immediately. And so he begins building, stone by stone, wall by wall, tower by tower. Barad-dûr rises, the Dark Tower. Not yet complete, not yet the terrible fortress it will become, but its foundations matter, because foundations reveal intention. Sauron is no longer hiding. He is preparing to rule openly. The traveler feels the scale of this turning point. The shadow has moved beyond rumor, beyond whispers. It is becoming physical, architectural, permanent. Meanwhile, far away in Lindon, Gil-galad receives more reports, more troubling news. Patterns become clearer. The signs are no longer subtle. Trade routes shift. Travelers vanish. Eastern lands grow increasingly hostile. The High King's suspicions harden into certainty. This is no scattered unrest. This is organized, directed, intentional. The traveler imagines Gil-galad studying maps late into the night, lantern light illuminating ancient parchment. Distances measured, routes examined, connections forming in his mind. He reaches the conclusion few wish to accept. Sauron has returned, not weakened, not broken, reborn. The realization carries enormous consequences, because Gil-galad understands something most others still do not. The war to come may not resemble the wars against Morgoth. It may be more subtle, more political, more deceptive, and in some ways, even more dangerous. The traveler notices Gil-galad's greatest strength here. He does not panic. He prepares. That is the difference between wisdom and fear. Fear reacts. Wisdom prepares. Messages begin moving west and east. warnings spread, alliances strengthen, quiet preparations begin. The High King cannot stop the shadow alone, but he can ensure the free peoples are not entirely unprepared. Still, even Gil-galad does not yet understand Sauron's most dangerous strategy, because the Dark Lord is planning something far more devastating than war, something that does not rely on armies, something aimed not at cities, but at trust itself. For soon, Sauron will approach the Elves not as a conqueror, but as a friend, and Middle-earth will change forever. The shadow continues growing in the east. Barad-dûr rises stone by stone. Mordor becomes stronger with every passing year. Yet no armies march west. No great invasion begins. No open war is declared, and that confuses many. If Sauron has truly returned, why wait? Why remain hidden? Why not strike while his enemies are divided? The traveler understands what few in Middle-earth yet realize, because Sauron has learned patience. He no longer seeks victory through force alone. He seeks something more elegant, more permanent, control from within. And to achieve that, he adopts a new form, a beautiful form, a trustworthy form, a form crafted not to inspire fear, but admiration. He becomes Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. The traveler pauses here, because this may be one of the most fascinating transformations in Tolkien's entire legendarium. Sauron, Servant of Darkness, appears not as a tyrant, but as a teacher, a bringer of knowledge, a master of craft. He does not arrive with weapons, he arrives with wisdom, advice, skill. The most dangerous lies are rarely obvious. They contain truth. Anatar truly possesses immense knowledge. He truly understands craftsmanship. He truly can teach. That is what makes the deception so effective. The traveler imagines word spreading among the elven realms, a noble figure from the east, wise, beautiful, learned beyond measure. Offering knowledge once thought lost, many are intrigued, some are cautious. One ruler, however, is not deceived, Gil-galad. This is one of the most important and most impressive facts about Gil-galad. He sees through Anatar immediately. Not completely. He does not yet know every detail, but he senses danger. The traveler imagines Anatar's envoys reaching Lindon. Polite words, respectful greetings, offers of friendship, promises of shared wisdom. To many rulers, such diplomacy would sound welcome. To Gil-galad, it sounds wrong, subtly wrong. He refuses him, firmly, quietly, without hesitation. This moment matters enormously, because Tolkien explicitly tells us that Gil-galad and Elrond did not trust Anatar. That instinct may have saved Lindon. The traveler notices the pattern again. Wisdom often begins with discomfort. Something feels wrong. Not enough evidence for certainty, but enough for caution. Gil-galad listens to that instinct. Others do not. Far to the southeast lies Eregion, a realm of mastersmiths, a kingdom famous for craft and artistry. There, Anatar finds far warmer reception. And among the smiths of Eregion, one name stands above all others: Celebrimbor, grandson of Fëanor, a brilliant craftsman, ambitious, gifted, driven by a desire to create works of lasting beauty. The traveler can almost feel the tragic inevitability. because Sauron understands exactly whom to target. Not the weak, the talented, the proud, the gifted. Those who believe they can master dangerous knowledge without being mastered by it. LOTR teaches. The elven smiths learn. Their craft advances beyond anything seen in centuries. Metals are shaped with extraordinary precision. Jewels hold strange power. Ancient techniques are rediscovered. The realm flourishes, and all the while, Sauron patiently guides events toward his true objective. The rings. The traveler imagines the workshops of Eregion. Molten metal glowing in the forge. Hammer strikes echoing against stone walls. Elven artisans crafting objects of breathtaking beauty. What begins as art slowly becomes something else. Power. The desire to preserve beauty, to stop decay, to protect what time destroys. This desire is not evil. That is what makes the tragedy so painful. The rings are not born from hatred. They are born from longing. The longing to preserve what is fading. The longing to hold beauty forever. Sauron understands that longing and weaponizes it. The rings of power are forged. Lesser rings first, then greater ones. Works of astonishing craftsmanship. The traveler feels the tension rising. Because even as these masterpieces are created, one truth remains hidden. Their maker is not merely a teacher. He is a dark lord. And his greatest work remains unfinished. Far away in Mordor, Sauron enters the fires of Orogruin. There, alone, he forges the instrument of domination, the One Ring. The traveler imagines the moment, fire warring from the mountain, molten gold glowing with unnatural light, ancient words spoken into flame, will poured into metal. Power condensed into form. The ring is completed, and in that instant, everything changes because the elves feel it immediately, not later, not gradually, immediately. The deception collapses. They understand. The traveler imagines Gil-galad at the exact moment Sauron places the ring upon his finger. A sudden realization, cool certainty, the shadow finally revealing its true shape. Every suspicion confirmed, every fear justified. LOTR was never a friend, never a teacher, never a benefactor. He was Sauron, and the greatest deception of the Second Age is complete. But Sauron has made one critical mistake. He underestimated the wisdom of the elves. 'Cause the 3 elven rings remain hidden beyond his reach. And now Gil-galad knows with absolute certainty war is no longer avoidable. The age of deception is over. The age of war has begun. The moment the deception is revealed, peace ends. Not gradually, not diplomatically, immediately. The traveler imagines the silence after realization. Across the elven realms, shock spreads like a sudden winter. The truth is now undeniable. Sauron has not merely returned, he has infiltrated, manipulated, deceived. For centuries, he stood among the elves as teacher and ally, while secretly crafting their chains. Trust has been broken, and broken trust often leads to the fiercest wars. Because betrayal wounds deeper than open hostility. The traveler notices something crucial. Sauron does not waste time. Once deception fails, force begins. The mask falls, the Dark Lord moves openly. Armies gather in Mordor, orcs march. Standards rise. The Second Age enters a new phase. War. And the first target is obvious. Celebrimbor and the realm of Eregion. Why Eregion? Because Eregion contains knowledge. Knowledge of the rings. Knowledge Sauron desperately wants under his control. The traveler imagines the beautiful lands of Eregion before the invasion. Green hills, elegant halls, great forges where master smiths once worked in peace. A realm defined by craft and artistry, not by war. That makes what follows all the more tragic, because some kingdoms are built to endure sieges. Eregion is not one of them. Its greatest strength was creation. Its greatest weakness becomes vulnerability. The armies of Mordor arrive like a storm. Black banners spread across the land. Fire follows iron. The traveler can almost hear the first alarms. Messengers racing through workshops. Horns sounding from towers. Smiths laying down tools to take up weapons. The transformation feels violent, sudden, wrong. The peaceful rhythm of craft gives way to survival. The siege begins. Sauron attacks with overwhelming force. This reveals another aspect of his genius. He adapts instantly. Deception when deception works. War when war becomes necessary. No hesitation, no sentiment, only objectives. And his objective is singular, the rings. The traveler imagines Celebrimbor during these desperate days. Brilliant craftsman, proud descendant of Feanor, now facing the consequences of misplaced trust. There is tragedy here, deeper than military defeat. Celebrimbor is not evil, not corrupt. He wanted beauty, preservation, mastery of craft. Sauron turned those noble desires into vulnerabilities. That realization alone must have been devastating. Still, he resists. Eregion fights, hard, desperately. But the outcome becomes increasingly clear. The city cannot hold forever. The traveler feels the weight of inevitability. Some battles are decided before the first sword is drawn. Numbers matter. Preparation matters. Fortification matters. Sauron holds advantages in all three. Eregion begins to collapse. Walls fall. Defenses break. Fire spreads through halls once filled with art and music. The great forges burn. Masterworks are destroyed. Centuries of beauty vanish in smoke. The tragedy becomes almost unbearable, because this is more than military conquest. It is cultural destruction. the destruction of memory, of artistry, of possibility. The traveler notices how often Tolkien treats such losses with gravity. The fall of beautiful things matters deeply in his world. Eregion becomes another such loss. And then comes the fate of Celebrimbor, captured, tortured, interrogated. Sauron demands knowledge, the location of the rings, the secrets of their making. The traveler pauses here because this becomes one of the darkest episodes of the Second Age. Sauron succeeds partially. Celebrimbor reveals much under torment, but not everything. Most importantly, not the location of the three. This matters immensely because those three rings remain beyond Sauron's reach. Hope survives, barely, even in defeat, even in horror. The traveler reflects on this powerful truth. Evil often wins battles. That does not mean it wins everything. Sauron captures Eregion. He destroys its realm. He kills Celebrimbor. Yet, he fails to seize total control. The three remain hidden. And hidden within that fact lies the future. The future resistance. The future survival of the elves. Still, the immediate reality is grim. Eregion has fallen. One of the greatest elven realms of the Second Age lies in ruin. And Sauron's power grows dramatically. The traveler imagines messengers escaping westward, exhausted, wounded, carrying terrible news. Eregion has fallen. Celebrimbor is dead. Sauron marches west, toward Lindon, toward the High King, toward Gil-galad. At last, the war Gil-galad foresaw for centuries has fully arrived. No more shadows, no more whispers, no more hidden schemes, only open war between the Dark Lord and the last great king of the Noldor. And now Gil-galad must do what every true king eventually faces. He must call for aid. Not merely for his kingdom, for all of Middle-earth. The fall of Eregion changes everything. With Eregion destroyed, the war is no longer confined to the eastern lands. Sauron now controls vast territory stretching westward, and for the first time since the end of the First Age, it seems possible that all of Middle-earth might fall under a single dark power. News reaches Lindon quickly. Messengers arrive exhausted, carrying reports of burning cities, broken defenses, and the death of one of the greatest elven smiths ever to live. There is grief, there is anger, but above all, there is clarity. Gil-galad now knows exactly what kind of enemy stands before him. Sauron is not merely powerful. He is patient, intelligent, and ruthless. He strikes only when advantage is his. He wastes nothing. He turns beauty into weakness and trust into weapons. And now he marches west, toward Lindon, toward the Grey Havens, toward the last great stronghold of the Noldor. Gil-galad does not panic. That is perhaps his greatest strength as a ruler. Where lesser kings might react with fear or rage, he becomes more focused, more decisive. He has spent centuries preparing for this possibility. Now, preparation becomes action. Messengers leave Lindon in every direction, to the elven realms, to allied lords, to the surviving powers of the West. Warnings spread across Middle-earth. War has come. Openly, the age of caution has ended. This moment reveals something important about Gil-galad. He understands a truth many rulers struggle to accept. No kingdom survives alone. Not even elven kingdoms. Pride destroyed too many realms in the First Age. Isolation doomed too many kings. Gil-galad refuses to repeat those mistakes. He calls for unity, not dominance, not submission. Unity. That decision helps save Middle-earth. At this point in history, one rising power among men becomes critically important. Numenor. It stands as the greatest kingdom of men in the Second Age. Powerful fleets, great armies, knowledge inherited from older ages. The descendants of those who once aided the elves against Morgoth. For years, Numenor has grown stronger. Its ships cross wide seas. Its influence reaches distant shores. Its people have become mighty. Gil-galad understands what this means. If Sauron is to be stopped now, the strength of Numenor may decide the war. And so he reaches across the sea. He asks for aid, not as a desperate beggar, as an ally. As a king who understands what is at stake. Sauron's armies continue advancing. The lands between Mordor and Lindon become battlefields. Rivers turn red, forests burn, ancient roads fill with soldiers. Entire regions that once knew peace now know only war. Yet, Lindon does not fall. Gil-galad personally oversees its defense. This matters enormously. He is not a distant king hiding behind walls. He leads, commands, organizes. In Tolkien's world, the best kings stand with their people. Gil-galad embodies that ideal completely. The war becomes brutal. Sauron's armies push west with terrifying momentum. At times, victory seems close, dangerously close. Some of the darkest years of the Second Age unfold here. Had events continued unchanged, Sauron might have won everything. That possibility is real, very real. But then the sea changes history. Ships appear on the western horizon, not merchant vessels, war fleets. The strength of Numenor has arrived. This becomes one of the great turning points of the Second Age. The Númenóreans land in overwhelming force, disciplined soldiers, heavy armor, power unlike anything Sauron expected from men. The tide shifts. Suddenly, Sauron faces something unfamiliar, resistance strong enough to challenge him directly. Battle after battle turns against him. His armies are driven back. His momentum breaks. The Western campaign collapses. For the first time in the war, Sauron is forced to retreat. Gil-galad's strategy succeeds because he understood what victory required. Not isolated heroics, alliances, cooperation, shared purpose. This is why Gil-galad matters so much in Tolkien's history. He bridges ages. He learns from the failures of the First Age and applies those lessons in the Second. He understands pride destroys, unity preserves. That wisdom saves entire civilizations. Sauron retreats to Mordor, defeated but not destroyed. And that distinction matters, because Gil-galad understands something many others do not. This war is not truly over. It is only paused. Sauron has lost territory, lost momentum, lost battles. But he still lives. As long as he lives, the shadow remains. Years pass, then centuries. The Great War fades into memory for many. Kingdoms recover, trade resumes, peace returns. But Gil-galad never fully relaxes. He remembers. He always remembers. He knows Sauron better than almost anyone alive, and deep within his heart, he understands a terrible truth. One day, the Dark Lord will return. One day, there will be one final war. And when that day comes, Gil-galad will stand at the center of it, beside a king of men, before the Black Land, facing Sauron himself. The last great battle of the Second Age is coming, and with it, the final chapter of the last High King of the Noldor. Long years passed over Middle-earth. Kingdoms rose and were brought low. Forests grew where battlefields had once lain barren, and rivers that had run red in war again flowed clear beneath the sun. Yet peace in Arda was seldom more than a season between storms. For though Sauron had been cast down and driven back into Mordor, he was not unmade. He endured. And in secret he gathered strength once more. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, did not forget. Never did he forget. Though centuries passed like wind over the sea, the memory of shadow remained with him. He had looked upon deception and seen what fair words might conceal. He had seen pride turned into ruin, and therefore he watched. Always he watched. In those days there came to Middle-earth great ships from the west, borne upon mighty seas, for Numenor had fallen. The proud island kingdom of men, greatest of all mortal realms, had been swallowed by the sea through pride and rebellion, and its glory had perished in a single cataclysm. Yet not all were lost. From the ruin came the faithful, and among them stood one whose name would be remembered while the world endured. Elendil. Tall he was, taller than any man of later days, and in him the blood of Numenor ran noble and strong. He came not alone. With him came his sons, Isildur and Anarion. They founded kingdoms in exile, Arnor in the north, Gondor in the south. Thus, the strength of Westernesse lived on, though diminished. Word of these new kingdoms reached Lindon. And when Gil-galad heard the name of Elendil, he understood at once that fate was moving. For here at last stood a king among men worthy of old alliance, a king not ruled by pride, a king not seduced by darkness, a king who remembered. And remembrance was precious in those days. Years passed, then came the stroke that changed everything. Sauron declared himself openly. No longer content with whispers and shadows, he moved in wrath. His armies multiplied. Barad-dû darkened the land. The fires of Orodruin burned fiercely. Then came the blow that none could endure. Minas Ithil fell. The city of the moon was taken. Its white walls were broken, its beauty defiled. And Isildur fled northward with great peril, bearing with him a treasure of immeasurable worth. A seedling of the White Tree, a memory of lost Numenor. When he came at last to Lindon, weary from grief and war, Gil-galad received him with honor. There the final truth became plain. This war could no longer be delayed. No kingdom would survive alone. Not Lindon, not Arnor, not Gondor. Not any free people beneath the sun. Sauron had grown too strong. Only unity remained. Thus was forged the last alliance of elves and men, one of the greatest unions ever seen in Middle-earth. Not since the Elder Days had such strength been gathered. Banners rose across western lands. Elves came from Lindon. Warriors from Rivendell followed Elrond. Men came from Arnor and Gondor. Dwarves, too, answered the call. Old rivalries were set aside. Old wounds were ignored, for all understood the same terrible truth. If this alliance failed, darkness would cover the world. Gil-galad stood at its head. Beside him stood Elendil, elf and man, ancient and mortal. The traveler of old songs might say no nobler sight had been seen since Beleriand sank beneath the sea. Gil-galad bore Eglos, the great spear of the High King, long and terrible in battle. Its point shone like frost beneath starlight. Many feared it, many fell before it. Yet more than weapon or crown, it was the king himself who inspired those around him. For there was in Gil-galad something rare, even among the Eldar. A majesty without arrogance, strength without cruelty, wisdom without coldness. He did not seek glory, he sought preservation. The preservation of light against shadow. So the alliance marched eastward, toward Mordor, toward the Black Land, toward destiny. Across plains and rivers they came, countless warriors beneath countless banners. The earth trembled beneath their passage. Songs were sung in many tongues. Prayers were whispered in many hearts. And above them all stood two kings, Gil-galad and Elendil, the last great hope of the West. Yet even as they marched, both knew the truth that wise rulers seldom spoke aloud. Not all who began this journey would return, perhaps neither of them, for beyond the mountains waited Sauron himself. And before victory could be won, a king must fall. So came at last the hosts of the last alliance unto Mordor. Long was their march, and grievous. Dust rose beneath countless feet, and the sound of iron rang over the barren lands. Before them stood the mountains of shadow, black and cruel beneath a blood-red sky, and beyond them the fires of Orodruin burned without ceasing. There lay the realm of Sauron. There stood Barad-dûr, and there the fate of the age would be decided. First came battle upon the plain of Dagorlad. There the armies of the west met the legions of Mordor in terrible war. Orcs without number poured forth. Trolls of vast strength strode beneath dark banners. Evil men from east and south cried aloud in harsh tongues. The plain became a sea of steel and flame. Long was the struggle. Many fell. Songs were ended there. Lineages broken. Names lost to all memory, save that of the world itself. Yet the last alliance did not break. For Gil-galad stood firm, and Elendil stood beside him. Where their banners flew, hope endured. Where aglows shone, the servants of shadow faltered. And so at last, Sauron's hosts were driven back behind the Black Gate. Then began the siege of Barad-dûr. Not for days, not for months, but for years. 7 long years the siege endured. 7 years of hunger, hardship, endurance, and sorrow. The great fortress would not fall easily. Its walls were wrought with power, its foundations rooted in dark craft. And Sauron remained within, waiting, watching, patient, for he knew something terrible. Time favors stone. Time exhausts flesh. Even immortal elves may grow weary of war. Even kings may weaken beneath long burden. Thus the siege became a war of endurance. Year after year, the alliance held, and year after year, the shadow remained. But at last came the final hour. For Sauron perceived that if he waited longer, defeat would come all the same. And therefore, he did what only the proudest and most terrible of tyrants dare. He came forth himself, not as Anatar, not as deceiver, not as whisperer, but as Dark Lord. In power unveiled, in wrath unbound. Then fear fell upon many, for terrible was Sauron in those days. His stature was greater than that of mortal men. Black armor clothed him like a second skin. His presence pressed upon the spirit like crushing weight, and upon his hand he bore the One Ring. The traveler of old lore would speak softly here, for words fail. The ring blazed with cruel fire, and through it flowed power gathered through long ages, dominion, will, command. Sauron had poured much of himself into that golden circle. Thus, when he stood armed with it, he was dreadful beyond telling. Many fled before him. Many were slain where they stood. Even the bravest felt terror. Yet 2 did not turn away. Gil-galad, Elendil, King of Elves, King of Men. Side by side, they advanced. At last, the hosts of the last alliance came unto Mordor. Before them rose the mountains of shadow, and beyond them the fires of Orodruin burned red beneath a darkened sky. There they fought upon Dagorlad. Great was the battle, and terrible. Orcs without number came forth from the Black Land. Trolls strode beneath banners of iron and flame. Many fell that day, both elf and man, and the plain was stained with blood. Yet the alliance did not break, for Gil-galad stood firm, and beside him stood Elendil. Where their banners flew, hope endured. So Sauron's armies were driven back, and Barad-dûr was besieged. Long was that siege. 7 years the fortress stood. 7 bitter years of war and weariness. Still, the dark tower did not fall. At last, seeing defeat drawing near, Sauron came forth himself. Then terror fell upon the battlefield. For terrible indeed was the Dark Lord in those days. Clad in black iron, vast in stature, and upon his hand burned the one ring, filled with his cruelty and will. Many fled before him, many perished, but 2 did not turn away. Gil-galad, Elendil, King of Elves, King of Men. Together they faced the Dark Lord. Steel met shadow. Aglows flashed like winter ice. Narsil shone beneath the ash-dark sky. Long they fought, and fierce was their struggle. Yet victory demanded a dreadful price. Gil-galad fell first. Burned by the heat of Sauron's hand, thus perished the last High King of the Noldor. With his fall, an age ended. Still Elendil fought on. Though wounded and weary, he stood against the Dark Lord until at last he too was slain, and Narsil groped beneath him. Hope seemed lost. But at the feet of the fallen king stood Isildur, son of Elendil. He took up the hilt shard of Narsil, and with that broken blade he struck. The ring was cut from Sauron's hand. In that instant, the Dark Lord's power collapsed. His form failed. His spirit fled, and Sauron was defeated. Thus ended the War of the Last Alliance. But victory came at grievous cost. Gil-galad was gone. Elendil was gone. The great kings of old had passed, and with Gil-galad ended the age of mighty elven kings in Middle-earth. He died as the greatest of kings often do, in battle, defending the light, standing when others would fall. And long after his passing, the elves still sang of him. Gil-galad was an elven king, and he stood against darkness when the world had greatest need of light.